Hey everyone, and welcome to this explainer. Today, we're cutting straight through the noise and the headlines to look at the actual nuts and bolts mechanics of the newly proposed ceasefire between Israel and Lebanon. Because, let's be real, when it comes to international diplomacy, the headlines rarely tell us the whole story, right? So we're going to strictly look at the blueprint of this U.S. brokered agreement, piece by piece. We want to see exactly how it aims to halt hostilities, who's actually involved, and, maybe most importantly, what absolutely critical details might be missing from the fine print.
To really understand the gravity of this agreement, we first have to look at the historical context that's driving it. Take a look at this quote from the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. It really captures the emotional and strategic stakes here. His reference to the same nonsense is a direct, unmistakable nod to the past 40 years of conflict in the region. We're talking about a relentless cycle, incursions, temporary truces, and then inevitably renewed fighting. This U.S. brokered deal isn't just trying to hit the pause button on the violence, it is fundamentally attempting to break that decades-long historical cycle. But the big question is, how exactly do they plan to pull that off?
Well, let's jump right into Section 1, a fragile new ceasefire, and setting the stage in southern Lebanon.
Okay, before we get into the shiny new mechanisms of this deal, we have to ground ourselves in the immediate reality right now. Over recent weeks, Israel has advanced into southern Lebanon, and their stated military objective there is to target the threat posed by the militant group Hezbollah. So, the primary, immediate goal of these diplomatic negotiations in Washington, it's simple on paper but incredibly complex in execution. They absolutely need to achieve a comprehensive halt to this violence. They're trying to renew a very fragile ceasefire, basically just to create enough breathing room to implement a brand new strategy.
Which brings us to Section 2, the pilot zone strategy, and replacing Hezbollah with the Lebanese army.
Now this is where things get really interesting. The entire agreement basically hinges on the creation of what they're calling pilot security zones. I know, it sounds like pure diplomatic jargon, right? But here's what it actually means on the ground. These zones are meant to fundamentally shift who controls the territory in southern Lebanon. Instead of the Iranian-backed militant group Hezbollah holding these areas, special units of the official Lebanese state army are going to move in. And a super crucial element here is that this entire pilot project will be guided and backed by the United States to ensure there is zero armed presence of Hezbollah left in these designated areas. And the strategy itself relies on a very specific phased approach. It's basically a three-step rollout. Step 1, the agreement explicitly requires that Hezbollah stops all firing and physically withdraws from southern Lebanon. Step 2, those special units of the Lebanese army step right into that vacuum to take official state control. And finally, Step 3 is expansion. You see, these security zones aren't meant to just sit there and be static. The plan is for them to gradually spread out across the entire south. It's a highly deliberate, staged transition of power over to the Lebanese army, all under U.S. guidance.
Moving on to Section 3, opposition to the truce and the hardliners pushing back.
Now, even with a highly structured, phased plan like that, this explainer wouldn't be complete without looking at the severe domestic and tactical complications threatening the whole thing. We actually have this fascinating and symmetrical roadblock. On one hand, the Iranian-backed group Hezbollah strongly opposes the very negotiations taking place between Lebanese and Israeli diplomats. And simultaneously, on the other hand, hard-right Israeli political parties are actively pushing back against the proposed truce. So we've got hardliners on both extreme ends of the conflict actively resisting this diplomatic effort. That makes the execution of those pilot zones incredibly precarious.
So with all that deep, symmetrical opposition, what are the diplomatic architects leaning on? What's the glue? In a word, American leverage. As the Israeli ambassador to the U.S. pointed out, he remains confident the agreement will hold because, ultimately, Hezbollah was going to have to understand that this isn't just some local, informal treaty. It's an agreement between Israel and Lebanon that carries the absolute full backing and weight of the United States. The core belief here is that U.S. involvement is the heavy anchor that's going to keep this deal from just floating away.
Let's pivot now to Section 4, the unresolved troop question and the missing piece of the puzzle.
And this is where we hit a massive reality check. Lina Sinjab, a BBC correspondent reporting from Beirut, brings up this completely fundamental question regarding the actual facts on the ground. Think about it. If the entire foundation of this agreement dictates that Hezbollah is disarmed and leaves the south to make way for the Lebanese army, does the Israeli military leave too? If you look at the text of the agreement itself, there are very clear, explicit demands on one side. Hezbollah absolutely must halt hostilities, be disarmed, and have no presence in the south. But then, there's a glaring omission. According to the reporting, the agreement currently doesn't mention anything at all about Israeli forces leaving South Lebanon.
It is a highly detailed, meticulous plan for one side's withdrawal, accompanied by total silence on the others.
And listen, that omission isn't just a paperwork error or a typo. It's a huge physical complication. The reality right now, as Sinjab reports, is that Israeli troops physically have boots on the ground. They are currently de facto occupying big sway of the south. You literally can't just have the Lebanese army peacefully stroll in and take over pilot security zones if another nation's military is already physically holding that territory. It significantly complicates the entire idea of a clean, immediate handover of power.
So how exactly are the diplomats explaining this? Well, the answer really lies in the phrasing. They're categorizing this as a gradual implementation agreement. The immediate, absolute, urgent focus is strictly on halting the active hostilities, basically just stopping the shooting. And because of this phased nature, the incredibly sensitive issue of an Israeli troop withdrawal is essentially being kicked down the road. It's largely expected that the mechanics of Israel actually leaving will be left for coming discussions rather than being definitively resolved right now in this initial document. But, kicking the can down the road might stop the shooting today, yet it leaves the region's long-term stability hanging by a very thin thread.
As we wrap up this explainer, we're really left staring at a fundamental paradox. The diplomats set out with the explicit goal of ending a 40-year pattern of nonsense, right? Ending those temporary truces and repeated incursions. They designed this innovative pilot zone system to replace militants with a state army, yet they completely left the immediate status of occupying forces to be figured out later. We really have to ask, can a blueprint built on gradual implementation actually survive its own missing pieces? Or, by leaving the absolute hardest questions for tomorrow, will this agreement inevitably revert right back to the exact historical cycle it was designed to stop? It's a massive question, and it's one that only time and the harsh realities on the ground in southern Lebanon will answer.